Greetings. Welcome to another episode of the Visionaries Podcast powered by StartUp Westport, where we dive into the minds of the biggest names in business and innovation. I'm your host, Jay Norris, CEO and co-founder of Guest Software. Today I'm sitting down with a tech entrepreneur and buddy of mine, Kal Amin. What is his vision? And what path did he take to become this serial entrepreneur? Find out now. So today we have Kal Amin, who's recently moved to Westport?
Relatively recently, yeah. We're a pandemic move into Westport. We've been here, it'll be 4 years this October, believe it or not. Time flies.
Really?
Yeah. It doesn't feel as recent, but it still feels relatively new.
So you were essentially a Westport COVID baby.
That is correct, yes. Some incarnation of a COVID.
Right, yeah, you COVID baby.
Exactly,
No
exactly.
doubt. Wow, Kal. I didn't realize it was that soon. So it's, if COVID happened in like March 2020. You came right in that same 2020?
No, we came about a year after.
Okay, 2021.
Yeah, 21.
Okay.
It's funny, we always joke that we bought our house sight unseen. Mm-hmm. The first day we saw our house was the day we actually moved into it. All of our furniture, everything was there. Mm-hmm. And we kind of went silent. We didn't see anybody for about a year.
Of course.
I'm sure our neighbors were probably like, who are these
people?
Strange people that moved in. And then, as the world started opening up again, really started to experience Westport, and we fell in love with it. It's a wonderful place, and we're excited to be here and raise our daughter here.
No, it's awesome, man. It's awesome. It's interesting. We got to know each other. You know, who introduced us initially?
I think it was Noah.
Noah.
Yeah.
Noah Fenn. Yeah,
that's right.
Great guy.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I think about how I've met so many people that have just moved here. And I had just moved here, my wife and I moved here maybe in 2018.
Okay.
Right? But so we'd be, right before COVID. But just the influx of new residents coming in. And the interesting part about you, I remember, was I met you and first thing you said was, you're gonna really like this guy. And I said, why? Because he's an entrepreneur, a tech entrepreneur, but he has a really interesting story. And I wanted to ask you about this story. So I'm gonna go forward first, and then I'm gonna ask you some questions backwards.
Sure.
All right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that stood out, he said, Jay, he's an ex-Googler. And I said, oh, really? Noah, you're an ex-Googler. He said, yeah, I know. And I said, so can you walk me through the Google experience? What was that like? And where,
Yeah, I mean, it was a very different time. I think most people don't believe that Google was actually a startup at one point.
Exactly.
And I was there during like the formative startup years. So, just to give you a bit of background, I started my career in tech in the late 90s. So I've been doing this for about 25 years or so now. But I was at AOL. And I started AOL in the late 90s when AOL was the number one property on the web in the United States.
Right.
We were really focused on really providing access to the internet at that point because there was no other real service that was at the kind of leading edge of what AOL was doing at the time. Right. So I learned about the internet and the advertising business through my time at AOL. I was down in Dulles, Virginia.
Okay.
And when we acquired Time Warner, which sounds funny to say now, all these years later, I decided to move to New York with AOL. And I moved up to New York with AOL, and I thought I wanted to be a salesperson at that point, moving from finance into sales. And realized that I was a terrible salesperson back in the early or late 90s. But what I was good at was really connecting the front of the house with the back of the house, as I like to describe it, which is really the sales organization and the advertising teams with all of like the back end teams.
Systems,
so really like more of like an operations type role. That all said, I was out at an event one evening and I ran into a former colleague from a company called Netscape, which some of you probably remember.
I remember Netscape.
She had just started at this company called Google. And she said to me, you would be a great fit as we really look to expand what we're doing in the advertising business.
Wow.
And I believe I was the first business analyst hired at Google in 2000. The company was like less than 200 people globally. I was number 10 or 11 in New York at the time, and we were trying to figure it out, right? This was right during the era of like
this right. You were like employee number less than 200, like 180.
187 was my employee number, which I remember. I think those first couple of hundred always remember their numbers, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, employee 187.
Wow.
Across the entire company, employee 10 or 11 in New York. No infrastructure at the company on the advertising side. Really focused on really building that search product and then building a business around it. I like to say that was part of the founding advertising team at Google back in 2000. Yeah.
Man, Kal, what a great place to be. And New York as well. Like that,
yeah,
so
it was in New York.
True startup in a way.
True startup. Yeah, I remember we were in the Simon & Schuster building in Midtown. This was before like WeWork even existed. So we were in a shared space with probably 15 or 20 other companies on the same floor. My first desk was a plastic file cabinet that I still have in my garage.
Take a picture of that.
I will. I certainly will.
No way.
Yeah, it was a true startup. We were early days. This
but
is
that desk is worth a lot right now.
It's invaluable.
That's my point. That's my point.
Exactly
it's
right.
worth a lot.
It's humbling, right, to show where you started from, for sure.
That's great, man.
Yeah.
And so from there, Spotify?
No. So I was at AOL to Google, where I spent almost a decade in different capacities, from the first business analyst on the ad side to running a team before I left around global market development.
Okay.
In between doing everything, when you're a startup, even in Google terminology, you're kind of doing a little bit of everything. Work with the product teams and the engineering organization, with the business side, and really it was all about scaling up, right? That's where I think I've added a lot of value every place I've ever been. It's truly about scaling up. But to answer your question, I left Google to go back to AOL when my former manager became the CEO of AOL, Tim Armstrong.
Oh, wow.
And a few of us joined him on that journey to really reimagine what AOL could or should be. It was really transitioning from this access business to a media business. And given our backgrounds and given what we had done at Google, a few of us joined Tim on that journey. I would say it was both most challenging and most rewarding experience to that point in my career. Because you have to remember, I knew AOL as a very different company from the 90s.
Right, and then
stepping away for a decade and coming back to a completely different organization.
Right.
It was an eye-opener. It was also an exciting experience.
It
really
must
helped.
have been, because I heard about Tim Armstrong a lot about him, and transformative.
Yeah,
trying to transform.
One of the most inspirational leaders I've ever worked with.
Yeah, definitely. And so now, after Spotify, after AOL, again, what happened?
Yeah, so I had the opportunity to use the Spotify product well before it came to the United States. And I had obviously experienced it as it was a European product. And luckily, when Spotify came to the States, I had a chance to meet with some of the folks on the advertising side of the business. I had a colleague and a friend of mine who had joined as their chief revenue officer, and met with the team there and decided to join Spotify. Originally, the role was focused on really sales strategy and sales operations, really to build the advertising business, really more for the free user within Spotify. But within about a year or so, I took on a much bigger role, so running global business operations, everything from sales strategy and operations, launching new markets around the world. I also had an opportunity to work very closely with the management team, including Daniel, to really help create a operating rhythm for the business, because we were scaling so quickly around the world.
I was about to say, the scale. So Spotify started in Europe, then it came here.
Yeah, it came to the States. I think we were in about 8 or 9 markets when I joined, about 65 when I left. And the goal was to really create this large global footprint to create scale around the world, right? And really bringing access to music to everybody around the world. This was pre the podcast strategy.
Yeah.
But yeah, really focusing on music as the core mission.
Interesting, because your competitor at the time was Pandora. Pandora was probably right before you, or right?
Yeah,
after.
in the States it was Pandora. I think we at the time would talk about really piracy being the main competitor, and I think the real vision of what Daniel, obviously in all of his genius to come up with is a product that would combat piracy and make music a legitimate, not only art form, which it is,
Right.
but also that the fact that it would create this opportunity to really drive value for artists and labels, so on.
Man, it's so interesting you said this, Kal. I didn't tell you the story about me and my pivot in the music business. I never told you this. One day I'm in the office and a guy comes to the office and he's throwing a CD on the floor and smashing it. And he's telling everybody, be quiet. I want you to hear this. And we're listening. Why is this guy throwing this disc on the floor? It's the guys from Napster. And he said, I just want to make a point. You won't hear that sound next year. And we're like, man, get out of the office. We don't know. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And essentially, the rest is history.
Yeah, no, it's true. Look, I mean,
Yeah,
again, you have these major pivots in technology and transformation, right? You go from access in the internet to having this open web.
Yep.
You go from downloading music, pirating music, to streaming. You know, there's these large technology advancements. Now we're in this world of AI, right?
I was
Which
about
is
to say,
the next
Web3
generation.
and AI, right?
That's right.
Web3 and AI is
That's
what
right.
everybody's talking about. And so, with the knowledge of that from Spotify, what made the jump to this Sounder FM? Is that what I heard?
Sounder.ai, yeah.
Yeah,
So
AI.
in between Spotify and Sounder, I was the president and COO of a news platform app called Flipboard, which is a content curation platform.
Yeah.
And you know, while I was there, a former colleague of mine from Google by the name of Dan Darty, Dan had reached out and basically had said, I'm getting into the audio space. Dan left after the Google IPO, started a bunch of companies in the property technology space, and then decided that he was going to get into audio. So he shared a version of his pitch deck with me, which I thought was interesting enough that I actually invested in the pre-seed round. And the original idea for Sounder was to create a search technology that would allow consumers to find specific points within a podcast episode to find exactly what they were looking for, listen to that clip, and then move on to go do something else. Because our belief was that with the exponential growth of podcasts and audio content, people didn't want to listen to the full podcast, but rather that just get that specific piece that they were interested in. So that was the original idea. The team was building that out, and I was helping Dan connect with folks that I had met along my journey through Spotify and other places as they had taken on bigger roles within the podcasting industry. And after a while, Dan basically said, look, you kind of know a lot of people in this industry. He's based in Colorado, I'm based on the East Coast, and he asked me to join him as his co-founder. And I had a decision to make. Do I stay at Flipboard and help to rebuild and reimagine what Flipboard can be for the next generation, or do I want to go build something from the ground up? And my passion has always been to build something from the ground up. I've always thought about taking that entrepreneurial leap and doing something on my own. I had never done it before. So I dove right in, and you know, I think it was like September, October of 2019. I officially joined. Our development team was in Eastern Europe and Serbia, so we flew out to Serbia. I hadn't seen Dan in 20 years. We met in Belgrade at the airport. Got picked up by our third co-founder who lives there. His name is Goran. Launched the first version of Sounder, the new version of Sounder, while we were there all together. Came back to the States, started raising capital, and then we're off to the races.
That is so
all of a sudden, the pandemic hits.
I was about to say, yeah, like 6 months later.
Yeah, like as soon as we launched, you know, that was near the end of the year of 2019, and then obviously in 2020, early 2020, we were in pandemic mode.
Right.
I think the kind of blessing in disguise or the silver lining for us is that we were fully distributed from the early days, so we were working
It's great because
remotely.
Everybody was remote anyway.
And then, you know, originally we were like, we had this oh shit moment because we thought the whole world was going to basically collapse and we were a brand new startup. But for us, another silver lining was that consumption went up.
Oh yeah.
Right? Consumption patterns changed. Like historically what you would see from a content consumption standpoint is early morning drive time or commuting time. You'd see afternoons and evenings.
Now it was just always.
And then changed. Everything changed because the patterns changed for everybody.
Wow.
So it was really interesting. And funny enough for us, as it wasn't funny as it was happening, but looking back on it, as countries were shutting down, we could actually see more podcasts being created in those countries because people were indoors and they were looking for ways to really, create something,
create new
right?
content.
Yeah,
Right.
that's exactly right.
Wow. What an interesting time for you guys. That was great. It was kind of like a catalyst. It was
really
kind of
was.
a catalyst to the business.
Yeah.
COVID.
Yeah, I mean,
COVID was a catalyst. That's crazy to say. But I mean, that's another reason you're here is because I realized you learned from so many other ventures and you said, I'm ready to take that leap of faith and do my own thing.
That's right.
And that's why, we created this for visionaries like yourself. And that's why I really wanted to get your story on. Because I had a couple other guys on the show and I realized they were like, yeah, visionaries actually see problems well before other people, right? Well in advance, and then they solve for them, right? And so tell me this, what would you say was the biggest challenge for Sounder? Was it raising cap? What was it, would you say, the biggest challenge for you guys when you sat down?
Yeah, I think I'd say a couple things. One, raising capital is always challenging, but we were fortunate enough to do so. It takes a lot of time, a lot of energy. Like I feel like as co-founder and CEO, you are raising capital every day. It's not like you start and you stop. You're having those conversations on a regular, daily basis. You know this as well as I do. I would say, we pivoted twice. And pivoting is a very hard thing to do. The first time we pivoted is when we pivoted from being a search engine into a creator platform. And then the second time we pivoted is from being a creator platform to being an ad tech or ad targeting solution for some of the biggest publishers in the world.
Got it.
I think many entrepreneurs and co-founders go on this journey because you're kind of going up funnel, right? You're going from an idea, getting the first set of users to use that product, ultimately building something that actually has product market fit.
Exactly.
And as you're looking to really drive revenue, enterprise is where the real revenue dollars are, right? And we kind of made that journey along the way. The hard part about that, though, is getting the team to align around the new vision versus from where you started from.
Exactly, because
it's hard.
It's really hard to get that as the CEO and co-founder. It's almost like you're herding cattle, and like you're saying, look, guys, this is I call it learnings.
Yes.
These are our learnings.
That is
this is why I'm reaching out and I'm sharing this with you, is because this is our learnings now.
Yeah.
Our own data doesn't lie.
Yeah.
We know what we know, right? We don't know what's going on out there sometimes, but we know what we know. I think we should make this move. And also, my team always tells me, especially my tech team, it's like, let's not build to speculation. We built to market.
Yeah.
And when you got, like you say, you got PMF, you got product market fit, and they're asking for it, then you kind of know you kind of got to go in that direction.
It was a hard one for us.
It was hard though. The pivots are hard.
Because we also had, we had about 15,000 podcasters on our platform actually as creators, right? So not only did we have to pivot internally, we also had to sunset this product, and we had to really let these creators know that we were moving away from this part of our business.
Right.
I think the team did a phenomenal job of really laying out the plan, being overly communicative with the podcasters, and we did it in a really thoughtful way. And I think it landed the best that it possibly could. But I think to your point, the data told the story. We saw that there was a massive opportunity for the technology that we built. We were getting a lot of traction with some of the biggest media publishers in the world. And we also saw that the unit economics were much stronger on the enterprise SaaS business than there were in a traditional media business. So we had to make the pivot to really stay successful and kind of moving in the right direction. And I'm glad we did. So
no, it's an amazing story. So would you say, Sounder, you were there with, because tell the audience here, Sounder's success story, successful exit, how long ago?
So it's relatively recent. We're about 5 months in. We were acquired by Triton Digital, which is a subsidiary of iHeartMedia. iHeart was one of our investors. And look, I think given the market volatility, we were excited to have this opportunity to drive really strong distribution for the product.
Right.
The other big thing about a startup is you can find product market fit, how do you create scale distribution?
We've been talking about that one with
right.
guests with our product.
Yeah.
It's the same
And
conversation.
it's the same thing. I think everyone
goes.
goes through it, and I think having the ability to integrate what we have built for contextual targeting, brand safety and suitability, and having it available through Triton's platform to their tens of thousands of publishers makes it a perfect fit and adds a lot of value to the publishers that they work with as well.
Exactly, because you built the pipes already, and they need it. Yeah, it's great. It's a great relationship. And so here we go. So the other thing, I did this last time with the last couple guests, is I went forward, talked about current to the future. Now I want to ask you a question, Kal Amin.
Yeah.
I mean, tell me your beginnings. Where were you born and raised? I always want to know, and then tell me the iterations, born and raised.
Yeah.
At high school.
Sure.
College.
Yeah, you'll have to prompt me on some of this. This is like a new learning / like skill that I'm still kind of working on. I always find it hard to talk about myself, so you'll have to kind of get it out of me a little bit.
Nah, dude, it's cool.
But no, so I was born, grew up, my parents are both of Indian descent. My mother is from India. My father was born and raised in Kenya in Africa.
Wow.
My brother was born in Kenya as well, in Mombasa. We moved they moved, because I wasn't born yet, but they moved from Kenya to London, where I was born in I want to age myself, so I was born in London. And then my father's family was all based in London, so we were there really closer to his family.
You're about, what, 30, 35?
Yeah.
About around there, right? 35?
I'll take that.
You'll take
that.
it?
Yeah.
Okay.
You could probably go up a decade, or two, but no, definitely we'll take that for now. So born in London, I always joke that we moved to the States before I adopted the accent. I would have been a lot cooler if I had that British accent, which I don't.
Right?
So we moved from London to the United States because my mother's family was all here.
How old were you at the time?
I started kindergarten here, so
Kindergarten, okay, that's
so I was like 4 or 5 years old when we moved.
Got it.
We moved to Queens, New York, of all places, and we were there for a few years. And look, this is where I say I'm still kind of, coming out of my shell in many ways. Come from humble beginnings. We were. Family just trying to make it, 2 hardworking parents in a new country. I always like to think about the fact that they are still kind of learning the English language along the way, going from England to the US, and working hard to really make sure there was food on the table and that we had a good education. After a few years in Queens, we moved out to New Jersey, where I really grew up. Central New Jersey.
Okay.
I like to...
High school there?
High school there as well.
Okay.
And it was... coming from humble beginnings, growing up in a blue-collar town, I think really helped form who I am, and having what I'll call small-town values with a global view has really allowed me to be the person that I am. And I truly believe in relationship. I building trust, creating partnership, and really being transparent,
Right.
And the more that I think you can do that, the more value you can create for everybody around you and for yourself as well.
No, Kal, that's great to hear that, because that's essentially what I felt when I first met you. I felt a sense of the broadness of you living in multiple areas, but moving to this town and actually wanting to lean in to what's going on here locally. And it's a common thread with all the guests that I have here, which is, where vision meets the world. But I'm like, Westport has a lot of visionaries who haven't really told their story. And now I've been tasked to say, well, okay, so what are we doing for Westport? So thank you for being the star mentor, StartUp Westport, which is essentially, when I hear small town values, that seems to be a box you just checked when you join StartUp Westport.
Yeah, I think for us, we've decided that this is our home. If you think about when you kind of grow up and you're in your earlier adulthood years, we lived in Manhattan.
Right. We
moved to Hoboken. We were trying to figure out where we were going to settle, and we're living here. This is our home.
Nice.
And if we're planting roots in Westport, in my opinion, it's important to also give back to the community however you can.
Yep.
And this seems like a natural extension of what I do. StartUp Westport is a wonderful program established by you and others, run by both Susan and Noah, who are doing a phenomenal job.
People.
And I've been really lucky that Susan Fenn has paired me with my mentee.
Right.
And
can you talk a little bit about your mentee, because I saw her.
Yeah.
That's
So we,
cool.
so my mentee's name is her name is Barry, and she is starting a digital out-of-home advertising company or media company for the alcohol industry. And we're able to not only start to really think about the go-to-market plans, but there's some new things that are coming out, which I'm not at liberty to share yet.
I get that.
Thinking about distribution as an example, we've actually been able to partner with someone locally to start distribution. So back to the community and back to really creating this environment where StartUp Westport and small businesses in town can interact.
Right.
There's magic there.
Oh,
there's value.
There's tons of
value. And the more value we can create across those two segments, I think the more we can really live up to that entrepreneurial spirit that exists in our town.
It's the circular economy here in town. I feel like we need to, and the thing is that StartUp Westport gives us kind of like an infrastructure to actually do it, right? But it's interesting. I look at StartUp Westport and I go, this was a job for the Chamber of Commerce, but we're going to connect them as well. So I'm talking to Matt and a couple other people at the Chamber to connect them into StartUp Westport as well, because they have this the smaller businesses, all the merchants, all in town. But I really feel like we should bring the Downtown Merchants Association into StartUp Westport.
Yeah, I think
as
you're
well.
right. I think you're right. Look, with Barry and what she's working on, it certainly has a much larger opportunity than just, I think, what's happening in Westport. But if we have the infrastructure, if we have businesses leaning in, what a perfect test market.
Oh my God.
The more learnings,
and then we can scale.
to your point,
the learnings
you can
and then
capture,
we build the template.
And then you scale it
And
up.
we scale.
That's exactly right.
No, that's what the plan is.
Yeah.
So here we go. I got a vision for you. Kal, what is your North Star for 2030? Can you picture that far ahead where, you would like to be as far as, well, personally, we know your kids growing a little bit more. But is there anything that you would like to accomplish by 2030 that you could share, like a vision or anything that you know?
Yeah, look, I think we have an opportunity in this country to continue to support the small to medium-sized businesses around the nation. Today, there are about 33 million of these businesses that exist. They make up about 44% of our US GDP. I think they've contributed since 1995 about 67% of the new jobs created in the United States. That's a massive market. So combine this market that historically has really worked on instinct and gut with this new transformative AI technology that allows you to create products and services and businesses that can support the SMB market, so they're making better decisions, they're making faster decisions, they're being more efficient. To me, that's a massive opportunity. And as the global kind of market continues to grow, and as countries around the world start to adopt AI, how do we support one of the most important segments of the US economy? Because we know when we have a healthy middle class, we have a very healthy nation. And to me, that's a very important part of what my focus is going to be. And the more I can spend time there building companies and focusing on opportunities that really support the SMBs, the better it will be for everybody.
Oh my God. Then you know what? I couldn't have picked a better outro, because that to me is essentially where I was hoping you would go. I didn't know where you go, but I almost feel like that's who we are, right? And we actually understand kind of what's broken. And what the pieces that aren't there, and the data that needs to be brought in with the AI to support these businesses. So, lastly, would you tell me this, if I was to ask you, if you could be anywhere in the world, you could live anywhere in the world, would you still choose Westport?
I 100% would, for sure. Look, I've had the opportunity to travel around the world.
Right.
I've been to, I don't even know how many cities at this point, but
Right.
given the roles that I've played, a lot of the companies that we've talked about, yes, I've had an opportunity to really spend time, in many places across the world, and there's nothing like this. Like this community brings together the entrepreneurial spirit. It brings together artists, creators, and it's a very welcoming community. We looked at quite a few different towns before moving to Westport, and we felt the most comfortable here because of how warm and inviting everyone has been since we've been here. The amount of friends that we've made in the short time that we've been here, the amount of relationships that we're building, and the ability to give back in a way that is recognized, not for the sake of creating recognition,
right,
but more for the sake of that people want to lean in and do want to do more of it, right? Yeah. The fact that I am now working as a mentor, being part of the mentorship program, a lot of my other friends in the community are like, I would love to be a part of that. So how do we start to amplify what we're doing here to create opportunities to really drive entrepreneurship? And also create more value for the town. That's
exactly, right. And the neighboring towns. I look at it like that. I always say Fairfield County as a whole.
That's right.
And we're touching all these bases. I have a new thing for the Visionary Podcast. I call it my 3 I's. It's want to make sure we have impact with innovation and inclusion.
I love it.
All right, those are my 3 I's. And I realize that locally, we're trying to make sure that that's a pillars. Those 3 pillars are here. StartUp Westport has helped with that. And so we want to continue to lean in. So I want to thank you, man, for your words of wisdom here.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
Ultimately, Kal, I see 2030.
Yeah.
We can see it, right? That's why I had to put it there, because I was like, my visionaries have thought bubbles.
It's right around the corner.
And it's right around, and we're going to blink and it'll be here.
That's right.
So I want to thank you for being on the show today, man.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, you made. And also, this guy, audience, you don't know, this guy can throw a party. I went to his party not too long ago. I'm talking 4 bands, the best food, kids hanging, and it was amazing. You and your wife throw a nice annual party.
Thank you so much.
So well, thanks for that.
Well, I appreciate it. It gets back to community.
It gets back to community, right?
It's a place where we have the ability to connect with friends and family that we haven't seen in a while.
Right.
My favorite part of the day, since you brought it up, wasn't about the music. It wasn't about the food. It was about the fact that there were kids running around all day from noon until 8 o'clock at night, no shoes, no just devices, having a great time. And that's what it's all about.
That's what it's all about.
And the more that we can curate experiences like that, the better I think we'll be.
We'll put it this way, Kal, your timing is amazing. And because tonight is the fireworks.
That's right.
And people don't know this. If you haven't been, the fireworks is like Westport's Super Bowl. It really is. Yeah. And you will see that vibrance tonight if your kids are out there, and it's just pretty priceless. It was one of the reasons we moved here, because it was almost kind of like you said, where we can live in other places.
Yeah.
Why Westport?
Yeah.
Right? And so I'm always like leaning in, pros, cons, and I said, well, the cons we can work on. We're solutionaries. We can help with some of the cons. We're gonna lean in. If it's anything, innovation and inclusion, let's do it.
Right.
So I think that this is a great town. It has a great canvas. Let's make this masterpiece.